I sacrificed everything for my daughter Jessie and her children for over 20 years. I abandoned my career, gave up my retirement plans, even sold my home to raise those kids as my own when she couldn't. I nursed them through fevers, helped with homework until midnight, worked 2 jobs to put food on their table. But the moment Jessie remarried, she decided I was nothing but a burden. She moved me to the damp basement with a rusty cot and a hot plate, telling me I should be grateful for the roof. What she didn't know was that the Social Security checks I'd been living on were just pocket change. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The real fortune, 4.7 million from my late husband's insurance policy, was sitting in an account she knew nothing about. And I was about to teach her the cost of treating family like trash. It was a chilly October evening when everything finally shattered between us. I had just climbed the basement stairs, my knees aching from the dampness that seemed to seep into my bones these days. The main floor of the house, my house, before I'd signed it over to Jessie years ago, was filled with the warm sense of a dinner I hadn't been invited to share. "Grandma Miriam, you're just in time." 12-year-old Angie spotted me first, her smile brightening the room. "We're having pot roast, your recipe." Jessie's head snapped up from where she was arranging plates on the dining table. The mahogany table my husband Marcus had crafted by hand for our 25th anniversary. The one I'd been told was too good for my basement accommodations. "Mom," Jessie said, her voice carrying that familiar edge of irritation, "we have company tonight. I told you this morning." I hadn't been told anything. Lately, Jessie had taken to informing me about family matters while I was half asleep or out of earshot, then claiming I was becoming forgetful when I didn't remember. Standing in the corner was Jonah, Jessie's new husband of 8 months. His eyes slid away from mine uncomfortably. Next to him was a well-dressed couple I didn't recognize, friends of theirs, presumably, given the way the woman was eyeing me with barely disguised curiosity. "Sorry, I forgot," I lied, not wanting to embarrass Jessie in front of her guests. "I just came up to get some hot water for my tea." "While you're here," Jessie said with a tight smile, "could you run to the store and pick up some wine? Jonah forgot to get enough for dinner." I felt my throat tighten. My arthritis was flaring badly today. The 3-block walk to the corner store would be agony, and we all knew it. "I can go," offered Angie, always my defender. "No," Jessie cut in sharply. "You're having dinner with us. Grandma can handle a simple errand." Behind her, 16-year-old Lenny rolled his eyes, giving me an apologetic look. He understood what was happening, but like me, had learned that confronting Jessie only made things worse. "Of course," I said, reaching for my worn coat hanging by the basement door, not the hall closet where the family's coats were kept. Jonah cleared his throat. "Maybe I should—" "It's fine," Jessie interrupted. "Mom needs the exercise. The doctor said walking is good for her arthritis." My doctor had said no such thing. In fact, he'd recommended I avoid walking long distances during flare-ups. But Jessie had stopped accompanying me to medical appointments the moment she'd met Jonah, preferring her new version of my health needs. I took the money she held out, from my own Social Security check that she now managed for me, and headed toward the door. "Red wine, nothing cheap," she called after me. "And don't take all night. We'd like to eat before the food gets cold." The walk to the store was exactly as painful as I'd anticipated. Each step sent shooting pain through my hips and knees, the evening chill making my joints stiffer by the minute. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. This was what my life had become. After raising Jessie alone when Marcus died suddenly of a heart attack when she was just 15. After taking in Jessie and her 3 children when her first husband, Sonny, abandoned them for a younger woman. After selling my own home to pay off Jessie's debts and ensure the kids could stay in their school district. After 2 decades of being both mother and father to Lenny, Angie, and little Mabel. Now I was the inconvenient elder, hidden away in the basement like a shameful secret, trotted out for errands no one else wanted to do. It hadn't always been this way. When Jessie was struggling as a single mother, I had been essential. I was the one who got the kids ready for school, while Jessie slept off late shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. I was the one who attended parent-teacher conferences, who cheered at soccer games, who taught Lenny to drive and helped Angie with her science projects. For years, Jessie had called me her lifesaver, had tearfully thanked me for sacrificing my retirement to help raise her children. The kids had flourished under my care, growing into thoughtful, resilient young people despite their father's abandonment. Then Jonah came into the picture. Successful, charismatic Jonah with his luxury car and his executive position. Suddenly, Jessie couldn't see the crumbling foundation of our family life anymore. She could only see the shiny future. Jonah promised. "Mom, Jonah thinks it would be better if we reorganized the living arrangements," she'd told me 6 months ago. "The kids are getting older, they need more space. The basement is actually quite cozy if we fix it up a little." The fixing up had consisted of moving my bed downstairs, along with a small dresser and a hot plate. The promised bathroom renovation never materialized. I still had to climb the stairs to use the main floor bathroom, timing my needs around the family's schedule to avoid inconveniencing everyone. I reached the store, purchased the wine with money I couldn't afford to spend, and began the painful journey back. As I walked, I found myself thinking about the bank appointment I had scheduled for tomorrow, the one Jessie knew nothing about. The truth was, I wasn't nearly as financially dependent as Jessie believed. Marcus had been meticulous about planning for our future. His life insurance policy had paid out $4.7 million, a sum I had kept absolutely quiet about when Jessie and the kids needed me. I had planned to use it to help the grandchildren through college, to ensure Jessie could eventually buy a home of her own. But somehow, over the years, my role had shifted from valued matriarch to tolerated burden. The money I had preserved for their future was still sitting in investment accounts, growing steadily while I lived like a pauper in my own home. Tomorrow would change everything. I had finally made the decision to reclaim what was left of my life. At 72, I deserved better than a basement cot and begrudged meals. The grandchildren I had essentially raised deserved to know the truth about their grandmother and about their mother. As I approached the house, I saw them all through the dining room window, laughing, plates full of the pot roast I had taught Jessie to make. No place had been set for me. No one was waiting for my return except to retrieve the wine I carried. Tomorrow, I thought, gripping the bottle tighter. Everything changes tomorrow. The basement was particularly cold that night, the old space heater sputtering weakly against the chill that seeped through the concrete walls. As I settled onto my cot, joints still aching from the walk, I allowed myself to remember how different things used to be. 22 years ago, Marcus and I had been planning our dream retirement. After 40 years of teaching elementary school while Marcus built his contracting business, we'd saved enough for the modest house on Lake Wisteria we'd always wanted. We'd planned to spend our golden years fishing, gardening, and hosting our only daughter and future grandchildren for summer visits. Then came the call that changed everything. Marcus collapsed on a job site, massive heart attack, just like his father before him. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived. I still remember Jessie's face at the funeral, hollow-eyed and 6 months pregnant with Lenny. Sonny, her husband, at the time, had stood awkwardly beside her, already showing signs of the restlessness that would eventually lead him to walk out on his family. "I don't know how to do this without Daddy," Jessie had whispered as we stood by the grave. He was so excited about becoming a grandfather. I'd held her then, pushing down my own grief to support hers. That moment set the pattern for the decades that followed. My pain, my needs, my dreams always secondary to Jessie's. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When Lenny was born, I drove 3 hours each weekend to help with midnight feedings and laundry. When Angie arrived 2 years later, I extended my visits to long weeks. And when Mabel came along, a surprise when Jessie thought her family was complete, I simply packed up my house and moved to be closer. Just until they're all in school, Jessie had promised. Then you can get back to your retirement plans. But then came the day Sonny's car wasn't in the driveway when I arrived for my regular Tuesday. Childcare duty. Inside, I found Jessie curled on the kitchen floor, sobbing, a crumpled note in her hand. "He's gone," she choked out. "He says he needs to find himself. He says he never wanted 3 kids. He says I've let myself go." In that moment, seeing my daughter shattered, I made the decision that would shape the rest of my life. "I'm here," I told her, gathering her in my arms just as I had at Marcus's funeral. "We'll figure this out together." The next day, I contacted a realtor about selling my house. The housing market had boomed since Marcus and I bought it. The sale would give Jessie enough to pay off the mountain of credit card debt Sonny had left behind and keep the children in their home. "Mom, I can't let you do that," Jessie protested weakly when I told her my plan. "It's just a house," I said, though we both knew it was more. It was the home Marcus had built with his own hands, where Jessie had grown up, where every corner held memories of our life together. "Besides," I added with forced cheer, "it makes more sense for me to move in here. You need help with the kids and I'm rattling around in that big house all alone." And so it began. I sold my home, moved into Jessie's guest bedroom, and became the primary caretaker for 3 children under the age of 6, while Jessie worked double shifts to keep them fed and clothed. Raising my grandchildren was both the hardest and most rewarding work of my life. Lenny, serious and thoughtful like his grandfather, needed help managing his anger at the father who'd abandoned him. Angie, fiercely intelligent, required constant intellectual stimulation to keep from becoming discouraged at school. And sweet. Mabel, who had been just a baby when Sonny left, grew up knowing me as much as a mother as a grandmother. There were ballet recitals and baseball games, science fairs and school conferences. I baked cookies for class parties, sewed Halloween costumes, and sat up through fevers and nightmares. On the rare evenings when Jessie wasn't working, I made myself scarce, encouraging her to bond with her children during the precious few hours she had with them. "You're a saint, Mom," Jessie would say, kissing my cheek as she rushed out the door for another 12-hour shift. "I don't know what we'd do without you." The grateful daughter of those difficult years was almost unrecognizable, in the woman who now relegated me to the basement and controlled my social security checks as if I were an irresponsible child. Reached under my cot for the locked box where I kept my most precious possessions, photos of Marcus, the children's handmade Mother's Day cards from years past, and most importantly, the documentation of the financial legacy my husband had left. Marcus had been the son of immigrants who believed deeply in planning for worst-case scenarios. "Life can change in an instant," his father used to say. "The wise man prepares." Marcus had taken those words to heart, maintaining a substantial life insurance policy even when money was tight during Jessie's childhood. When he died, the insurance company had issued a check that took my breath away, $4.7 million. Far more than I'd ever expected, more than enough to ensure I'd never worry about money again. But watching Jessie struggle as a single mother, seeing the scars her children carried from Sonny's abandonment, I'd made another decision. To live, modestly, and preserve the bulk of the money for when they truly needed it. For college funds, for down payments on first homes, for security against whatever hardships life might throw their way. I'd never told Jessie about the money. At first, it was because she was so overwhelmed with single parenthood and grief. Later, it was because I saw how hard she was working, how determined she was to provide for her children on her own. I feared that knowing about the money might undermine her independence, might make the challenges seem less important to overcome. So I lived on my teacher's pension and the modest returns from a small portion of the insurance money, while the bulk of the fortune sat in diversified investments, growing steadily over the years. I had always planned to reveal the truth when the time was right, perhaps when the oldest grandchild was ready for college, or when Jessie finally found her footing enough to pursue her dream of finishing her master's degree. I never imagined I would need to use it to rescue myself from the very people I had sacrificed everything to protect. I closed the box, sliding it back into its hiding place. Tomorrow's bank appointment wasn't just about reclaiming my financial independence. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my position in the family I had helped to build and sustain through its darkest hours. As I settled back onto my cot, I heard footsteps overhead, the dinner party continuing without me, laughter occasionally filtering through the floorboards. Soon, they would notice the bottle of wine I'd left on the kitchen counter before retreating to my basement exile. Let them come. Looking, I thought as I closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be soon enough for revelations. Morning arrived with the sound of hurried footsteps overhead. I checked my watch. 6:45 a.m. Jessie would be rushing to get the children ready for school before her shift at the hospital. Once, this would have been my domain, preparing breakfast, packing lunches, making sure backpacks contained completed homework. Now, I remained in the basement until the morning chaos subsided, another unspoken rule of my new position in the household. My appointment at Lakeside Trust Bank wasn't until 10 a.m., giving me plenty of time to prepare. I dressed carefully in the best outfit I still owned, a navy blue skirt suit I'd kept from my teaching days. It was slightly dated, but still presentable. More importantly, it reminded me of who I used to be: respected, competent, independent. Waited until I heard the front door close and Jessie's car pull out of the driveway before making my way upstairs. The kitchen was a disaster. Cereal bowls with milk still pooling at the bottom, toast crumbs scattered across the counter, a pot of coffee half full but stone cold. Once I would have automatically cleaned this mess without a second thought. A financial advisor who had been one of Marcus's closest friends. For over 20 years, Harrison had managed the funds conservatively but effectively, growing the original $4.7 million to nearly $7 million through careful investments. We spoke quarterly by phone, with annual in-person meetings that I always arranged when Jessie was working. Today's meeting was different. Today, I would be transferring a significant portion of those funds to a new account, one that would allow me immediate access to cash for the first time in years. I was rinsing my breakfast plate when I heard the front door open. Jessie appeared. In the kitchen doorway, still in her scrubs, her expression tight with irritation. "Mom, did you move my nursing textbooks?" she demanded without preamble. "I need them for my certification renewal class, and they're not on my desk." "I haven't touched your books," I replied calmly, drying my hands. "Have you asked Lenny? He was working on a biology project yesterday." Jessie's eyes narrowed as she took in my appearance. "Why are you dressed like that? Where are you going?" The suspicion in her voice made something harden inside me. When had my own daughter started monitoring my movements as if I were an untrustworthy child? "I have an appointment," I said simply. "What kind of appointment? Is it medical?" "Because you know I need to be there for medical appointments. Your memory isn't what it used to be." There it was again, the implication that I was becoming senile, that I couldn't manage my own affairs. A convenient narrative that justified Jessie's increasing control over every aspect of my life. "It's not medical," I replied. "It's personal." Jessie crossed her arms. "Personal how?" "Mom, we've talked about this. After you gave that salesman your social security number last year, I never gave anyone my social security number, I interrupted, my patience finally fraying. That was a story you invented to justify taking control of my checks. Her face flushed. I'm just trying to protect you. You're getting older, and I don't want people taking advantage. The only person taking advantage is you, I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us, a truth neither of us had spoken aloud before. Jessie's expression shifted from irritation to shock, then hardened into something colder. Is that really what you think? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. After everything I've done for you? I almost laughed. Everything you've done for me? Jessie, I sold my home, the home your father built, to save yours when Sonny left. I raised your children while you worked. I gave up my retirement, my friends, my independence to support this family. And we took you in when you had nowhere else to go, she shot back. We give you food and shelter. In the basement, I finished, for her. With a cot and a hot plate, in my own home. It's not your home, Jessie said flatly. Your name isn't on any paperwork. It's my house, and I decide how things work here. The casual cruelty of her words stole my breath. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I had been denying for months. My daughter, the little girl I had read bedtime stories to, the teenager I had comforted through her first heartbreak, the young mother I had supported through abandonment, now saw me as nothing more than an obligation, a burden to be managed, not a person to be respected. You know what, Mom? Jessie continued, her voice softening into something almost patronizing. I think you're upset because you forgot to take your medication this morning. Why don't you go lie down and we can talk about this later when you're feeling more yourself? I straightened my shoulders, suddenly thankful for the bank appointment that now felt like a lifeline. I haven't forgotten anything, Jessie. For the first time in years, I'm seeing things very clearly. I moved past her, toward the front door, but she stepped into my path. Where do you think you're going? I need to know where you'll be. No, I said firmly. You don't. Her eyes widened at my defiance. Mom, you're being ridiculous. If you walk out that door right now, we need to have a serious discussion about whether this living arrangement is still working. It was meant as a threat, but it landed like a promise, the first hopeful thing I'd heard in months. I think we do, I agreed, reaching for my coat. When I return, we can discuss my plans to move out. Jessie's expression shifted from anger to panic in an instant. Move out? With what money? On what income? Be reasonable, Mom. You need us. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. For years, the narrative had been that they needed me, my time, my energy, my support. Now that those resources had been depleted, the story had conveniently flipped. Now I needed them, was dependent on them, should be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity they allowed me to keep. I have resources you know nothing about, I said quietly, a small preview of what was to come. Jessie's laugh was sharp and dismissive. What resources? Your Social Security barely covers groceries. Your teacher's pension is a joke in today's economy. You have nothing, Mom. The cruel certainty in her voice was the final confirmation I needed. This confrontation wasn't a momentary lapse in an otherwise loving relationship. This was who we had become, who she had become. A woman who could look her mother in the eye and tell her she had nothing, was nothing, without her daughter's reluctant charity. We'll see, I said simply, and walked past her to the door. If you leave now, don't expect things to be the same when you return, she called after me, a last desperate attempt to maintain control. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, looking back at the daughter I had sacrificed everything for. I'm counting on it, I replied, and stepped out into the morning sunlight, closing the door firmly behind me. The walk to the bus stop helped clear my head. The crisp autumn air felt like freedom after months of basement confinement. I thought of the grandchildren as I waited for the bus. They would be in school now, unaware of the confrontation between their mother and me. unaware of how dramatically our family dynamic was about to change. I loved those children with a fierceness that sometimes surprised me. Lenny, now 16 and starting to look so much like Marcus around the eyes that it sometimes took my breath away. Angie, 12 going on 30, with her sharp mind and sharper tongue. And little Mabel, just 9, still crawling into my basement. Caught some nights when thunderstorms frightened her. The bus arrived and I carefully climbed the steps, nodding to the driver who recognized me from my occasional trips to the library, the one outing Jessie hadn't managed to curtail completely. "Looking fancy today, Mrs. Crawford," he remarked with a friendly smile. "Important meeting," I replied, dropping my fare into the box. As the bus wound its way through town toward the financial district, I remembered the day Marcus and I had opened. Our first account at Lakeside Trust. We'd been so young, just married, with nothing but dreams and Marcus's determination to build something lasting. One day, he'd promised, squeezing my hand across that first banker's desk, "We'll have more than just the change in our pockets. I'll make sure you never have to worry." He'd kept that promise, working 60-hour weeks building his contracting business from nothing while I taught school and managed our modest household. We'd never been wealthy during his lifetime, but we'd been secure, comfortable in the knowledge that we were building something together, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. The bitter irony was that the financial security Marcus had worked himself to death to provide had come only after he was gone, too late for us to enjoy together, but just in time for me to help Jessie when her world fell apart. The bus stopped in front of a gleaming building of glass and steel, nothing like the modest brick structure where Marcus and I had opened that first account. Lakeside Trust had grown along with our investment, expanding into wealth management for clients far more affluent than we had ever been during Marcus's life. I took a deep breath and straightened my jacket before entering the building. The young receptionist looked up with the practiced smile of someone paid to assess visitors at a glance and sort them into categories of importance. "May I help you?" she asked, her eyes taking in my dated suit and sensible shoes. "I have an appointment with Harrison Winters," I said, matching her professional tone. "Miriam Crawford." Her expression shifted subtly. Harrison was a senior partner. His clients, typically arriving in luxury cars with drivers, not on city buses wearing decade-old clothing. "Of course, Mrs. Crawford. Mr. Winters is expecting you. Please take the elevator to the 14th floor." The elevator carried me upward, and with each floor, I felt my old self returning. Not the basement dweller, not the burden, but Miriam Crawford, widow of Marcus Crawford, a woman of substance and dignity. Harrison was waiting when the elevator doors opened, his tall frame still imposing despite his 70 years. He'd been Marcus's friend since high school, had been best man at our wedding, had held my hand at the funeral. "Miriam," he said warmly, enfolding me in a brief hug. "Right on time, as always." His office was understated but elegant, with a spectacular view of Lake Ontario. We exchanged pleasantries as his assistant brought coffee, but Harrison had always been perceptive. "Something's changed," he observed, studying my face across his desk. "You've made a decision." I smiled, grateful for his directness. "Yes, I need to make some changes to the account structure, and I need your advice about housing." Harrison nodded, pulling up my file on his computer. "The portfolio is performing exceptionally well. Current value is $687 million, with approximately $4.2 million in relatively liquid assets." He turned the screen so I could see the numbers, the evidence of 22 years of careful stewardship. The amount still stunned me, even though I reviewed the statements quarterly. It was so far removed from the basement cot, the hot plate, the meager allowance Jessie reluctantly provided from my own Social Security checks. "I need to establish a separate account in my name only," I said. "And I need access to enough cash to secure housing immediately." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "Immediately? Miriam, Has something happened with Jesse? I hesitated, then decided that the complete truth was necessary. Harrison wasn't just my financial advisor. He was the closest thing to family I had, left besides my daughter and grandchildren. Jessie moved me to the basement 6 months ago when she remarried, I said, keeping my voice steady. She controls my government checks. This morning, she informed me that I have nothing and no one without her charity. Harrison's expression darkened. I see. I've allowed this situation to continue because I was trying to preserve family peace, I continued. But I can no longer sacrifice my dignity for Jesse's convenience. Of course not, Harrison agreed, his fingers already moving over his keyboard. We can establish the new account immediately. As for housing... He paused, considering. There's a property you might find interesting. The Riverside condominiums completed construction last month. Upscale, secure, excellent views. Walking distance to shops and medical facilities. That sounds perfect, I said. But won't there be a waiting list? Harrison smiled. The developer is a client. I believe we can arrange something, especially for a buyer who can offer cash with no financing contingencies. For the next hour, we reorganized my financial life. A new account with immediate access, a cashier's check for the condo down payment, a revised overall investment strategy that would provide generous monthly income while preserving the principal. What, about the college funds? I asked as we finalized the paperwork. For years, I had earmarked portions of the investment returns for each grandchild's education. They remain as established, Harrison assured me. Separate trusts, untouchable by anyone except the named beneficiaries when they reach college age. Relief washed over me. Whatever happened with Jesse, the grandchildren's futures were secured. As I prepared to leave, Harrison handed me an envelope. Your new credit card. Platinum level, significant credit line. It's been active for years, but I've had the card reissued to your new address. The condo association has agreed to a short-term lease while the purchase is finalized. I stared at the sleek card, so different from the prepaid debit card Jesse reluctantly reloaded each month with a fraction of my own money. One more thing, Harrison said, his expression serious. I think it's time you told Jesse the truth about your financial situation. I nodded slowly. Today, but first I need to secure my new home. The car service is waiting downstairs, he said, walking me to the elevator. The driver will take you to view the condo, then wherever else you need to go. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished metal, back. Straight, head high, eyes clear. Not a burden, not an obligation. A woman reclaiming her life. The luxury sedan waiting outside the bank was a far cry from the city bus. The driver held the door with formal courtesy, and as I settled into the soft leather seat, I allowed myself a moment to imagine Jesse's face if she could see me now. But this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about teaching Jesse a lesson, though that would inevitably happen. This was about reclaiming the dignity that had been slowly stripped away, one basement step at a time. The Riverside condominium exceeded my expectations. Spacious, sun-filled rooms with views of both the city skyline and the lake beyond. The day agent, clearly briefed by Harrison, treated me with the deference reserved for wealthy clients, never blinking when I wrote a check for the deposit on the spot. When can I move in? I asked as we completed the paperwork. The unit is ready now, she replied. We can have the lease agreement prepared by this afternoon. I nodded, a plan forming. Perfect. I'll return with my personal items tomorrow. As the driver held the car door for me again, I made a decision. Take me to Lakeview Mall, please, I instructed. I have some shopping to do before I return home. I hadn't set foot in Lakeview Mall in over a year. Jesse always claimed it was too expensive for our budget, insisting we shop at discount stores instead. The irony of her frugality with my money while I sat on millions wasn't lost on me as I entered the bright, bustling shopping center. The driver had offered to wait, but I'd dismissed him with a generous tip. This afternoon was mine to savor, each decision a small reclamation of my independence. I started at a high-end department store, where an attentive saleswoman named Gloria helped me select a wardrobe befitting my actual financial status. Tailored slacks and blouses, cashmere sweaters in jewel tones that Gloria insisted brought out the color in my eyes, a butter-soft leather handbag, and shoes that cushioned my arthritic feet while still looking elegant. Special occasion? Gloria asked as she arranged for my purchases to be delivered to my new address. You could say that? I replied. I'm starting over. Her approving smile warmed me. Good for you. Too many women our age think it's too late for fresh starts. Next came a salon, where I surrendered my faded, self-trimmed hair to a stylist who didn't try to hide his horror at its condition. When was your last professional cut? He asked diplomatically. About 6 years ago, I admitted. Before my daughter took control of my finances. He paused, scissors in hand. Well, we're going to fix that today. I'm thinking a modern bob, perhaps some subtle highlights to blend the gray. Something low maintenance but elegant. 2 hours later, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror, stylish, polished, with a haircut that took years off my appearance and makeup that enhanced rather than masked my features. My shopping complete, I decided to treat myself to a proper meal at the mall's nicest restaurant. As I waited for my table, I heard a familiar voice that made my heart skip a beat. I just don't know what's gotten into her lately. The ingratitude is staggering. Jessie's voice. I turned slightly and saw her sitting at a corner table with her husband Jonah and another couple I recognized from their dinner party the previous night. The woman, Patricia, I recalled, was Jonah's sister, and her husband Sonny was ironically named like Jessie's ex. I ducked behind a decorative plant, not ready for this confrontation. Not yet. Honestly, Jessie continued, sipping what appeared to be an expensive cocktail. After everything we've done for her, the basement apartment was Jonah's idea, you know. So generous, giving up that storage space. Jonah nodded solemnly, accepting the undeserved credit. Family takes care of family, but there has to be appreciation. Boundaries. Patricia made a sympathetic noise. It must be so difficult, dealing with her declining years. My mother-in-law was the same way before we found Sunny Pines retirement community. We looked into those places, Jessie sighed dramatically. But on her income, the only options were, well, less than ideal. And she refused to even consider them. You'd think she'd be grateful we're keeping her out of a state facility, if he... Blood boiled at the casual lies, the rewriting of history. Jessie had never mentioned retirement communities except as threats when I didn't comply with her demands. The problem, Jonah added with the confidence of someone who'd known me for less than a year, is that she doesn't understand how the world works anymore. She thinks her teacher's pension should afford her a lifestyle that's simply not realistic. In today's economy? Exactly, Jessie exclaimed. And I try to explain about inflation, about housing costs, but she just gets this stubborn look. Then she brings up the house, my house, as if her name were on the deed. Technically, Patricia offered cautiously, didn't she help you buy it after Sonny left? A flash of irritation crossed Jessie's face. She contributed, yes, but that was years ago, and frankly, it was her duty as a mother. Parents are supposed to help their children establish themselves. She raised your kids too, didn't she? Patricia's husband asked. While you were working? Jessie's smile tightened. She helped out, sure, but that's what grandmothers do. And she was living with us rent-free, eating our food. It was a fair exchange. I felt sick listening to this revision of 2 decades of sacrifice. In Jessie's telling, my raising of her children while she worked double shifts was reduced to helping out. My providing the down payment for the house, the entire payment in fact, was merely a mother's duty. Anyway, Jessie continued, checking her watch, she stormed out this morning after a ridiculous argument, said she was moving out, if you can believe it. With what resources, I have no idea. Her Social Security barely covers her medications. She left? Patricia asked, seeming genuinely concerned. Where would she go? Jessie waved a dismissive hand. Oh, she'll be back. She has nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. She's probably at the library, her usual rebellion. I'll pick her up on the way home. Let her cool off first. Jonah reached across the table to pat Jessie's hand. You're a good daughter, doing what's best for her even when she can't see it. It's so hard, Jessie sighed, playing to her audience. Sometimes I think she's doing it on purpose, making things difficult just to punish me for having a life beyond her. I'd heard enough. The hostess approached to tell me my table was ready, and I allowed her to lead me across the restaurant, directly past Jessie's table. The conversation stopped abruptly as I approached. Jessie's eyes widened, taking in my transformed appearance, the elegant new clothes, the professional haircut, the straight-backed confidence I now carried. Mom? She said, confusion evident in her voice. What are you? How did you? I smiled, pleasantly, as if encountering casual acquaintances rather than people who had been discussing me moments before. Hello, Jessie, Jonah. Lovely to see you both. I nodded to the other couple. Patricia, Sonny, I hope you're enjoying your lunch. Jessie recovered quickly, her expression shifting to concern tinged with embarrassment. Mom, where have you been? I was worried sick. And what's all this? She gestured vaguely at my appearance. Just doing some shopping, I replied calmly. It's been quite a productive day. Patricia leaned forward, curiosity overriding politeness. Your hair looks amazing, Mrs. Crawford. Did you have it done here at the mall? Thank you, yes. Marcel at Expression Salon. He's a genius with mature styles. Jessie's face flushed. Mom, you can't afford... I should continue to my table, I interrupted smoothly. My reservation was for one, but you're welcome to join me when you've finished your meal. I'd love to tell you about my new condo. Your... What? Jessie's voice rose sharply. I smiled again, enjoying the genuine shock on her face. My new condominium at Riverside. I've just signed the lease, moving in tomorrow. A beat of stunned silence followed this announcement. Jonah recovered first. Mrs. Crawford, he began in the condescending tone I'd grown to despise. I think there's been a misunderstanding. The Riverside is a luxury development. The units there start at $750,000, yes, I finished for him. Quite reasonable, actually, for the amenities offered. River views, doorman service, heated indoor pool. Jessie's expression had transformed from shock to alarm, with a growing edge of suspicion. Mom, what's going on? Where did you get money for designer clothes and fancy condos? What have you done? The accusation in her tone, the immediate assumption that I must have done something wrong, something criminal or foolish, was the final confirmation that my decision was correct. Nothing illegal, I assure you, I said coolly. As I mentioned this morning, I have resources you know nothing about. I'm simply finally putting them to use. What resources? Jessie demanded, her voice rising enough that nearby diners were beginning to take notice. You've never had money. Dad left us with nothing but debts when he died. The hostess hovering nearby looked increasingly uncomfortable. I gave her a reassuring nod. I'll be with you in just a moment, I told her, then turned back to Jessie. Your father left me very well provided for. I chose not to use that provision when you needed help. That was my decision, one I don't regret. But now I'm making a different choice. I straightened my new cashmere sweater and adjusted the strap of my leather handbag. I'll be home tonight to collect my things. After that, you're welcome to visit me at Riverside, if you can manage a civil conversation. Without waiting for a response, I followed the hostess to my table, feeling Jessie's stunned gaze burning into my back. For the first time in years, I didn't hunch my shoulders against her judgment. Instead, I walked tall, each step carrying me further from the basement and closer to the life I deserved. The house was quiet when I returned that evening. I had expected a confrontation, perhaps even a scene with Jessie waiting at the door to demand explanations. Instead, the driveway was empty except for Lenny's bicycle propped against the garage door. I found him in the kitchen, heating leftover pasta in the microwave. At 16, he seemed to be perpetually hungry, growing taller by the day with a frame. That reminded me increasingly of his grandfather. Grandma? His eyes widened as he took in my appearance. "Whoa, you look amazing. Did you win the lottery or something?" I smiled, setting my handbag on the counter. "Something like that." "Where is everyone?" Lenny's expression shifted, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "Mom and Jonah went out after lunch, said they needed to discuss some things. Angie's at her friend's house for a study group, and Mabel's upstairs playing." He hesitated, then added, "Mom seemed really upset when they got home. I overheard her telling Jonah that you've lost your mind, that you're making up stories about having money. Is everything okay?" The concern in his voice touched me. Of all the grandchildren, Lenny had always been the most perceptive, the most sensitive to the undercurrents of tension in the household. "I'm fine," I assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I've made some decisions about my future." I glanced around the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals, packed countless school lunches, baked birthday cakes and holiday cookies. Despite Jessie's claims of letting me live rent-free, this house had been as much my home as hers, built on my sacrifice and labor as surely as if I'd hammered each nail myself. "Your mom and I see things differently," I said carefully. "About my contributions to this family, about what I deserve at this stage of my life." Lenny nodded, surprisingly adult in his understanding. "She treats you like you're invisible sometimes, or like you're a kid who can't make your own decisions." The simple accuracy of his observation brought a lump to my throat. "Yes, that's exactly it." "So what are you going to do?" he asked, retrieving his pasta from the microwave. "I'm moving out. I've found a place of my own." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "For real? Where? How can you afford—" He stopped abruptly, embarrassed by the question. "It's okay," I said. "That's what your mother wants to know too. The answer is complicated, but the short version is that your grandfather left me better provided for than anyone realized. I've kept that private until now." Lenny's eyes widened. Again. "So you've had money this whole time, even while living in the basement?" "Yes." I moved to the refrigerator, pouring myself a glass of water to give my hands something to do. "When your mother needed help after your father left, I chose to use my resources to support this family without revealing their full extent." "Why?" The question was direct, without judgment. I considered how to explain decisions made over decades to a teenager whose life experience was still developing. "Initially, because your mother was vulnerable, struggling. I didn't want to overwhelm her with sudden wealth when what she needed was stability and support. Later," I sighed. "Later, it became more complicated. Patterns were established. Expectations formed." Lenny nodded slowly. "And now you're finally standing up for yourself." "Yes," I said, touched by his understanding. "That's exactly it." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can I help you pack?" That simple offer of support broke something loose inside me. After months of being treated as an inconvenience, a burden, here was my grandson seeing me clearly, respecting my decision enough to help me implement it. "I'd like that," I said, swallowing against the emotion in my throat. Together we descended to the basement. The contrast between its damp chill and the sun-filled luxury of the condominium I'd viewed earlier made my heart ache. Not for myself, but for what Jessie had become, that she could relegate her mother to such conditions without apparent remorse. There wasn't much to pack. My clothing, the few worn items I'd kept after Jessie had insisted I downsize to accommodate the basement's limited storage, fit easily into a single suitcase. My books, photographs, and the small mementos that had survived multiple cullings filled 2 cardboard boxes. "Is this really all your stuff?" Lenny asked, looking around the sparse space. "All that's left," I confirmed, kneeling to retrieve the locked box from under my cot. As I straightened, a small voice came from the stairs. "Grandma? Are you leaving us?" Mabel stood on the bottom step, her 9-year-old face solemn, clutching the stuffed rabbit I'd sewn for her 5th birthday. "Come here, sweetheart," I said, sitting on the edge of the cot and patting the space beside me. She approached cautiously, her eyes taking in the suitcase and boxes. "Mom said you were confused, that you were making up stories." "I'm not confused," I said gently, "and I'm not leaving you. I'm just moving to my own home, a place where I can have my own kitchen, my own bathroom, and where you can visit me anytime you want." "Can I sleep over sometimes?" she asked, a tinge of excitement breaking through her concern. "Of course. I'll have a special room just for you and your siblings." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and Angie appeared, her expression a mixture of defiance and curiosity. "So it's true," she said, leaning against the wall with studied casualness. "You're bailing on us." Lenny frowned at his sister. "She's not bailing. She's getting herself out of a bad situation." Angie's posture softened slightly. "Mom's been on the phone with Aunt Patricia for like an hour, saying Grandma's having some kind of breakdown, making up stories about being rich." "It's not made up," I said, meeting her challenging gaze steadily. "Your grandfather left me very well off. I chose not to use that money while you children were growing up, because your mother needed my help in other ways. But why live in the basement if you could afford something better?" Angie demanded, the bluntness typical of her 12 years. It was a fair question, one that had been echoing in my own mind with increasing frequency over the past months. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "we allow ourselves to be treated poorly because we believe we're serving a greater good. I thought maintaining peace in this household was more important than my own comfort." "That's messed up," Angie declared. I smiled despite myself. "Yes, it is. And that's why I'm leaving." The front door slammed upstairs, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps. Jessie appeared at the basement door, her face flushed with anger, or perhaps something else. "Children, go upstairs," she ordered without preamble. Lenny stood his ground. "We're helping Grandma pack." Jessie's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Now, Lenny." "It's okay," I told him quietly. "I'm almost finished. Thank you for your help." He hesitated, then nodded, gathering Mabel's hand in his. "Come on, Squirt. Let's go. Make sure Grandma has our new address." Angie lingered a moment longer, her gaze moving between her mother and me, then followed her siblings upstairs. As their footsteps faded, Jessie descended the remaining stairs, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "So this is really happening," she said, her voice tight. "You're walking out on your family based on some delusion of wealth." I stood, straightening to my full height. The basement ceiling was low enough that I had developed a habitual stoop over the months, but now I consciously corrected it, looking my daughter directly in the eye. "No delusion, Jessie. Your father left me $4.7 million in life insurance. It's now grown to nearly $7 million through careful investment. I have documentation for every penny." She flinched slightly at the specific numbers, but quickly recovered. "If that were true, which I don't believe for a second, why would you have kept it secret? Why would you have sold your house to help me if you were sitting on millions?" "Because you needed me," I said simply. "Not my money, but me. You needed help raising your children, stability during a difficult time. I chose to provide that without complicating our relationship with financial entanglements." Financial entanglements, she repeated, her voice rising. You mean like buying me a house? Paying for the children's private school? Those kinds of entanglements were fine, apparently. Those were gifts, freely given. They came with no strings, no expectations of control or gratitude. Jessie's laugh was sharp, disbelieving. So what changed? Why the dramatic reveal now? What do you want? The question crystallized everything that had gone wrong between us. In Jessie's mind, my actions could only be interpreted through the lens of manipulation, of wanting something from her. I want nothing from you, I said quietly. That's the point you seem unable to grasp. I'm not leaving to punish you or to extort better treatment. I'm leaving because I finally understand that I deserve more than what this household has been willing to give me. In that moment, the truth of my words resonated through me with perfect clarity. This wasn't about Jessie's behavior or the basement or even the money. It was about reclaiming my own worth, my own right to dignity and respect. For the first time since Marcus died, I felt completely certain of my path forward. Jessie stared at me, her expression shifting between disbelief and calculations I could almost see playing out behind her eyes. You're serious, she said finally. You actually believe you have millions of dollars. I opened the locked box I'd retrieved from under the cot, removing a thick folder of documents. I don't just believe it, Jessie, I know it. And after today, so does Harrison Winters at Lakeside Trust. So does the real estate agent who just leased me a condominium at Riverside. Her gaze fixed on the folder. What's that? Documentation, I replied, handing it to her. Quarterly statements, insurance policies, investment records dating back to your father's death. Everything you need to verify what I'm telling you. Jessie took the folder hesitantly, as if it might bite her. She opened it with trembling fingers, her eyes widening as she scanned the first page, a recent statement showing the current balance of my main investment account. This can't be real, she whispered, but the conviction had drained from her voice. She flipped to the next page, and the next, moving faster as the reality began to sink in. $7 million? You've had $7 million all this time? Yes, I said simply. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing. And you let me struggle? You watched me work double shifts until I collapsed from exhaustion? You let me worry about how I'd pay for the children's education? Whether I could keep this house? Her voice rose with each question. What kind of mother does that? The accusation stung, but I held my ground. I helped in the ways you needed. Most. I raised your children while you worked. I bought this house outright so you'd never have to worry about a mortgage. I've paid the property taxes every year, though you don't know that because the bills come to my P.O. box. I established college funds for each of the children. But you could have done so much more, she cried. We could have had a better life, better opportunities. Money isn't everything, Jessie, I said quietly. What your children needed, what you needed, was stability, love, consistency. That's what I provided. She shook her head, not ready to accept my explanation. So why now? Why reveal this now? Are you trying to punish me for the basement? For Jonah? No, I said firmly. This isn't about punishment. It's about recognition. Recognizing that I deserve better than what you've been willing to give me. The basement was just the final step in a pattern that's been building for years. Jessie's face flushed. I've been taking care of you. No, I corrected gently. You've been controlling me. There's a difference. Taking care of someone means respecting their dignity, their autonomy. You've treated me like a child, or worse, like a servant. Deciding what I can eat, where I can go, how I can spend my own social security checks. She flinched at the accuracy of my assessment, but quickly rallied. I was trying to protect you. You're getting older. You don't understand how the world works anymore. I understand perfectly well how the world works, I interrupted. I managed this family's finances for decades before you decided I was incompetent. I raised you alone after your father died. I built a career in education while supporting a household. And for the past 20 years, I've been quietly managing a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio without a single misstep. My calm recitation of facts seemed to deflate her more effectively than any emotional outburst could have. She sank onto my cot, the folder still clutched in her hands. "I don't understand," she said, her voice smaller now. "Why didn't you tell me?" I sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "At first, it was because you were grieving, struggling to raise 3 children alone. I didn't want to overwhelm you with sudden wealth or undermine your determination to stand on your own feet. Later," I sighed, "later I began to see how you viewed me, as a resource, not as a person with my own needs and desires. I feared what would happen if you knew." "You didn't trust me," she said flatly. "I didn't trust what our relationship had become," I corrected. "And based on how you've treated me these past months, I was right to be cautious." Jessie stared at the statements in her hands, her fingers tracing the impressive figures. When she looked up, her expression had transformed. The anger was gone, replaced by something more calculated, almost eager. "Well, this changes everything," she said, her tone brightening artificially. "You don't need to move out, Mom. We can renovate the basement properly, or better yet, you can have the guest room upstairs. We'll make it beautiful for you." I watched the transformation with a mixture of sadness and resignation. This was exactly what I had feared. That knowledge of my wealth would change how Jessie saw me, not because she valued me more, but because she valued what I could provide. "My mind is made up," I said firmly. "I'm moving to Riverside tomorrow." "But that's so far from the family," she protested. "The children need you. I need you." "It's 20 minutes by car," I pointed out. "And the children are welcome to visit any time. You too, if you can approach our relationship with more respect than you've shown recently." Her face hardened slightly at the condition, but she quickly smoothed her expression. "Of course, Mom. I know things haven't been ideal lately. Jonah and I have been under so much stress with his job and the kids' activities." I stood, gently, taking the folder from her hands. "I'm not interested in excuses, Jessie. I'm interested in change. Real change in how you treat me, how you speak to me, how you think about my place in this family." She rose quickly, reaching for my hands. "I can change. We can fix this. Now that I understand about the money." "That's exactly the problem," I interrupted, withdrawing my hands from hers. "This isn't about the money. If your respect for me is conditional on my financial status, then it isn't respect at all." Jessie's expression faltered, genuine confusion crossing her face. In that moment, I realized how fundamentally she misunderstood what had gone wrong between us. She genuinely believed that my objection was to specific conditions, the basement, the limited allowance, the controlling behavior, rather than to the underlying attitude those conditions represented. "I don't understand what you want from me," she said finally. "I want you to see me," I replied simply. "Not as a resource to be used or managed, not as a problem to be solved, but as a person, your mother, with my own value, my own dignity, my own right to self-determination." She shook her head slightly, still struggling to grasp what seemed so obvious to me. "Let me put it this way," I continued. "When you introduced me to Jonah's parents last Christmas, how did you describe me?" Jessie frowned, trying to recall. "I'm not sure. Probably just my mom or the children's grandmother." "Exactly. Not as a retired teacher with 30 years of service. Not as someone who speaks 3 languages and has traveled to 15 countries. Not as a person with my own history, accomplishments, and identity. Just a relation, defined solely by what I am to you and your children." Her frown deepened. "You're being ridiculous. Of course I see you as a person. A person you relegated to the basement," I reminded her quietly. "A person whose financial decisions you took over without consultation, a person you discuss with your friends as if I were a troublesome child rather than an adult with agency and dignity. Jessie's gaze dropped, a flicker of genuine shame crossing her face. Perhaps, finally, my words were penetrating. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. That's a start, I said, recognizing that something is broken. The fixing will take time, and it will happen, if it happens at all, with me living in my own space, making my own decisions, and being treated as an equal rather than a dependent. I gathered my suitcase and one of the boxes. Lenny can help me with the rest in the morning. For tonight, I've reserved a hotel room. You're leaving now? Tonight? The panic in Jessie's voice was unmistakable. Yes, I said firmly. My car service is waiting outside. Car service, she repeated faintly, the reality of my changed circumstances finally sinking in. I paused at the foot of the stairs, looking back at my daughter. Despite everything, my heart ached for her. For the frightened single mother she had been, for the controlling woman she had become, for the possibility of who she might yet be if she could recognize the damage her behavior had caused. I love you, Jessie, I said softly. That hasn't changed. What's changed is that I finally love myself enough not to accept being treated as less than I deserve. I climbed the stairs without looking back, each step carrying me away from the basement and toward a future I was finally ready to claim. The children were waiting in the living room, 3 solemn faces watching as I emerged from the basement, with my suitcase. Mabel rushed forward immediately, wrapping her arms around my waist. I don't want you to go, she said, her voice muffled against my sweater. I set down my box to return her embrace. I know, sweetheart, but I'm not going far, and you can visit me whenever you want. Angie stood with her arms crossed, her expression carefully guarded. So it's true? About the money? Yes, I confirmed. It's true. She nodded slowly, processing this information. And Mom really didn't know? She didn't. But you're still leaving, even though you could stay now and make things better here. The challenge in her voice was clear. Lenny answered before I could. She doesn't need to fix things here, Angie. Mom's the one who put Grandma in the basement. In the first place. I know that, Angie snapped, then looked back at me. I just don't understand why you'd keep all that money secret when it could have made things easier for everyone. It was a fair question from a 12-year-old perspective, where wealth equaled solutions rather than complications. Sometimes having money doesn't fix the real problems, I said gently, and sometimes it creates new ones. She frowned, not fully satisfied with my answer, but unwilling to press further. Lenny stepped forward. I told the car service to wait. I'll help with your box. As he picked it up, the front door opened and Jonah entered. He froze at the tableau before him, me with my suitcase, Mabel clinging to my waist, Lenny holding my box of belongings. What's happening here? He asked, his gaze moving from me to the basement stairs where Jessie had now appeared, her eyes red-rimmed. Grandma's leaving, Mabel announced, still holding on to me. She has her own money and she bought a condo at Riverside. Jonah's eyebrows shot up. Riverside? That's... He trailed off, clearly recalculating his approach to me in light of this information. Yes, quite expensive, I finished for him. I can afford it. He glanced at Jessie, who nodded slightly, confirming what must have seemed incredible to him. Well, he said, his tone shifting to something almost deferential. This is unexpected. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss. There's nothing to discuss, I interrupted. My decision is made. I'm moving out tonight. Tonight? Jonah echoed, looking between Jessie and me. Surely that's not necessary. If there's been a misunderstanding... No, misunderstanding, I said firmly. Just clarity, finally. Jonah stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the children couldn't still hear every word. Miriam, I know the basement arrangement wasn't ideal, but we were doing our best with limited resources. If we'd had any idea of your financial situation, you would have treated me differently, I finished. That's precisely the problem. He had the grace to look slightly abashed but recovered quickly. We could make different arrangements now. The guest room upstairs, perhaps. Or we could build a proper in-law suite. Thank you, but no. I've already secured my own place. Jonah glanced at Jessie again, clearly expecting her to intervene, to convince me to stay now that my financial status had been revealed. When she remained silent, his expression hardened slightly. Well, if you're determined to leave, at least let me drive you. It's the least I can do. The offer was transparent, a chance to continue the conversation, to wheedle or persuade or manipulate. I shook my head. My car service is waiting. But thank you for the offer. Mabel's arms tightened around me. Can I come with you? Just for tonight? My heart ached at her request, but I knew it would only complicate an already difficult situation. Not tonight, sweetheart. I need to get settled. But you'll be my very first guest once I'm properly moved in. She reluctantly released me, and I knelt to her level. I promise I'm not leaving you. I'm just changing where I live. You'll always be my precious granddaughter. Angie stepped forward then, her adolescent reserve cracking slightly. You'll still come to my science fair next month, right? I'm doing a project on climate adaptation in urban plants. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I assured her. Lenny, always practical, asked, What time should I come by tomorrow to help? With the rest of your things? Around 10, if that works for you. He nodded, then surprised me by leaning in for a quick, fierce hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered, the words striking deep into my heart. How extraordinary to be seen, to be understood by this young man who somehow grasped what his mother could not. I straightened, picking up my suitcase again. I should go. The driver is waiting. Jessie finally spoke, her voice rough. Mom, please. Just stay tonight. We can talk more in the morning. There was genuine pleading in her tone, but I recognized the pattern. The move to delay, to wear down, to eventually have her way. It would not work this time. My mind is made up, I said quietly. I'll call tomorrow about arranging for the rest of my things. Jonah made one last attempt. Miriam, be reasonable. It's getting late, and you're upset. Decisions made in emotional states are rarely— I'm not upset, I corrected him calmly. I'm finally seeing with perfect clarity. And my decision wasn't made today. It's been building for months, years even. Today is simply when I finally acted on it. I moved toward the door, the family parting reluctantly to let me pass. As I reached for the handle, Jessie made a small, wounded sound. Mom, I'm sorry about the basement. I never meant to hurt you. I turned to face her. I believe you. But intention isn't the only thing that matters. How we treat people, especially those who depend on us, reveals who we truly are. I can change, she insisted. Now that I understand, I can do better. I hope you will, I said honestly. Not for my sake, but for your own, and for your children who are watching and learning from every interaction. A sleek black sedan waited at the curb, the driver standing beside it with dignified patience. As he took my suitcase and box, I heard the front door open behind me. Grandma, Mabel called, rushing down the front steps. She thrust a small object into my hands, the stuffed rabbit I'd made for her. Take Hoppy with you, so you won't be lonely tonight. Tears pricked my eyes as I accepted the shabby, well-loved toy. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll take good care of him. The driver held the car door for me, and as I settled into the plush leather seat, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. I was leaving the house where I'd spent 20 years, the family I had helped raise, the life I had known. But I was not leaving empty-handed. I carried with me dignity, self-respect, and the knowledge that I had finally stood up for my own worth. The financial security Marcus had provided was only part of it. The true wealth was in reclaiming my identity, my autonomy, my right to be treated with basic human respect. As the car pulled away from the curb, I did not look back at the house, or the figures still standing in the doorway. Instead, I looked forward, through the windshield, toward the lights of the city and the future I was finally claiming as my own. "To the Grand Hotel, ma'am?" the driver asked, meeting my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. "Yes," I confirmed. "And tomorrow to Riverside Condominiums." "Very good, ma'am." The simple courtesy in his tone, professional respect, without condescension or calculation, felt like a balm after months of Jesse and Jonah's manipulative concern. This was how it should be. This was how I deserved to be treated. As the familiar neighborhood receded behind us, I felt not grief but a surprising lightness. I had worried that leaving would feel like abandonment, like failure. Instead, it felt like liberation. Like the first full breath after years of shallow breathing. I stroked the worn velvet ear of Mabel's stuffed rabbit, a tangible reminder that while relationships might change, love could remain. The grandchildren would adjust. They might even benefit from seeing their grandmother claim her dignity, her right to be treated with respect. For now, though, I allowed myself to simply be present in this moment of transition. The past could not be changed. The future would unfold in its own way. But tonight, this pivotal night, I had finally chosen myself, and that made all the difference. The Grand Hotel lived up to its name, a historic landmark in the city center with soaring ceilings, marble columns, and staff who moved with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to catering to wealth and privilege. As the doorman welcomed me with a respectful nod, I felt a momentary disorientation. After months in the basement, the opulence surrounding me seemed almost unreal. "Good evening, Mrs. Crawford," the receptionist greeted me warmly. "We have your suite ready. Would you care for some refreshments sent up?" "Tea would be lovely," I replied, finding my voice. "And perhaps a light dinner." "Of course. Our kitchen is at your disposal until midnight. The concierge will escort you to your suite." A young man in an impeccable uniform appeared at my elbow, taking charge of my modest luggage with the same care he might show a collection of designer bags. As we crossed the gleaming lobby, I caught my reflection in a gilt-framed mirror, a well-dressed older woman with a stylish haircut and straight posture, moving with quiet dignity through a space designed for luxury. I barely recognized myself. The suite was larger than Jesse's entire first floor. A spacious sitting room with antique furniture, a bedroom with a canopied bed, and a marble bathroom with a soaking tub large enough to swim in. Floor to ceiling, windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, including the river where my new condominium awaited. "Will there be anything else, Mrs. Crawford?" the concierge asked after explaining the room's amenities. I hesitated, then made a decision. "Yes." "Could you arrange for a florist to deliver arrangements to this address tomorrow morning?" I wrote Jesse's address on a notepad. 3 separate bouquets, please. 1 for Mabel Crawford, 1 for Angie Crawford, and 1 for Lenny Crawford. "Of course. Would you like to include messages?" "Yes." I thought for a moment, then wrote 3 notes. For Mabel, "Hoppy will visit soon. Love, Grandma." For Angie, "Looking forward to your science fair. Love, Grandma." For Lenny, "Thank you for seeing me. Love, Grandma." After the concierge departed, I sank into a plush armchair by the window, suddenly exhausted. The day's emotions, anger, determination, vindication, sadness, had taken their toll. Yet beneath the fatigue, I felt something unfamiliar. A sense of possibility, of expansion rather than contraction. For so long, my world had been narrowing, physically confined to the basement, socially restricted by Jesse's control, emotionally contained to avoid confrontation. Now, it was as if walls had fallen away in every direction. I could go where I pleased, see whom I wished, make decisions based solely on my own desires rather than others' expectations. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. My dinner arrived, a perfectly prepared salmon with fresh vegetables, and a glass of wine I hadn't ordered, but which the waiter assured me complemented the meal perfectly. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten without preparing the food myself or cleaning up afterward. The simple luxury of being served, of having my needs anticipated and met, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After dinner, I soaked in the enormous tub, letting the hot water ease the ache in my arthritic joints. Then I called Harrison. "Miriam," he answered on the first ring. "How are you settling in?" "I'm at the Grand Hotel tonight," I told him. "I've left Jesse's house." "Good," he said simply. It was past time. I told her everything, I continued. About the money, about my plans. How did she take it? I considered the question. Initially with disbelief, then anger that I'd kept. It's secret, then a rapid pivot to trying to convince me to stay now that she knows I'm wealthy. Harrison's snort was eloquent. Predictable. Yes, I agreed. But there was something else, too. A moment when I think she genuinely began to understand how much damage has been done to our relationship. Whether that understanding will lead to change, that remains to be seen. "And how are you feeling?" His voice softened. "Tired," I admitted. "Sad. But also," I searched for the right word, "free." "Freedom takes some getting used to," he observed, "especially after prolonged constraint." "I'm discovering that," I agreed. "It's almost overwhelming." "One day at a time, Miriam. You've taken the hardest step already." After we said goodnight, I sat on the edge of the bed, contemplating the luxury around me. This room for one night cost more than Jesse had budgeted for my monthly expenses. The disparity between my basement existence and this opulence was jarring, almost disorienting. Yet the material upgrade was merely the surface manifestation of the true transformation. The real change was internal. The decision to value myself enough to demand better treatment, to refuse conditions that diminished my dignity, to assert my right to self-determination. I slept deeply that night, without the usual pain in my back, from the sagging cot, without straining to hear movement upstairs, without calculating the safest time to venture up for a bathroom visit. The morning brought renewed energy and purpose. After a leisurely breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I called the real estate agent who had shown me the Riverside condominium. "Mrs. Crawford, good morning. I have excellent news. All your paperwork has been processed. The lease agreement is ready for your signature, and the unit is prepared for your arrival. Would you like to come by this morning?" "Yes, that would be perfect," I replied. "I'll be there at 9, if that suits." "Absolutely. And if you don't mind my saying so, several items were delivered for you already this morning. Furniture you ordered, I believe?" I smiled, Harrison's efficiency at work again. "Yes, that's correct. Thank you for receiving them." After settling my hotel bill and leaving a generous tip for the staff who had treated me with such consistent respect, I took the car service to Riverside. The building was even more impressive in the morning light, its glass facade reflecting the blue sky and the river beyond. The lobby featured marble floors, comfortable seating areas, and a coffee bar where residents chatted over morning beverages. A doorman greeted me by name, Harrison's work again, no doubt, and escorted me to the leasing office. The agent, a young woman named Tara, welcomed me warmly. "Mrs. Crawford, it's wonderful to see you again. Everything is ready for your new beginning." The phrase caught me by surprise. A new beginning. Yes, that was exactly what this was. The paperwork took only minutes to complete. Then Tara handed me a set of keys and a small envelope. "This was delivered for you this morning, along with your furniture." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Harrison. "Miriam, welcome to your new life. You deserve every moment of happiness it brings. Your friend, Harrison. Accompanying the note was a small silver key. What's this? I asked Tara. She smiled. Mr. Winters arranged for a housewarming gift. If you'll follow me? We took the elevator to the 7th floor, and Tara led me to my new home. As she opened the door, I gasped in delighted surprise. The empty condominium I'd viewed yesterday had been transformed. Elegant furniture arranged in comfortable groupings, artwork on the walls, fresh flowers on the dining table, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the breathtaking view of the river. I couldn't find words to express my emotions. The key is for the terrace garden, Tara explained, pointing to a glass door leading to a private outdoor space I hadn't noticed during yesterday's viewing. Mr. Winters mentioned you enjoy gardening. I stepped onto the terrace, finding it already outfitted with comfortable seating, raised planting beds filled with herbs and flowers, and a small fountain whose gentle burbling created an atmosphere of tranquility. This is too much, I said, overwhelmed by Harrison's generosity. Not according to Mr. Winters, Tara replied with a smile. He was quite specific about creating a space where you could immediately feel at home. Home. The word resonated through me, not a basement, not someone else's house where I was tolerated. My home, reflecting my tastes, accommodating my needs, respecting my dignity. There's one more thing, Tara added, leading me back inside to a door I hadn't explored. She opened it to reveal a bedroom decorated in cheerful colors, with 3 distinct areas, a space with a desk and bookshelf, another with a gaming setup, and a cozy reading nook with stuffed animals. Mr. Winters mentioned you have 3 grandchildren who might visit, she explained. We tried to create a space they would each enjoy. The thoughtfulness of this gesture, anticipating not just my needs, but my deepest wishes for continued connection, with Lenny, Angie, and Mabel, broke through the last of my composure. Tears flowed freely as I took in this physical manifestation of what I had tried to explain to Jessie. That independence didn't mean abandonment, that setting boundaries didn't mean severing ties. It's perfect, I managed, wiping my eyes. Absolutely perfect. After Tara left, I wandered through my new home, touching surfaces, opening drawers, learning the space that would now be my sanctuary. In the master bedroom, I found the closet already filled with the new clothes I'd purchased yesterday, each item carefully hung or folded. In the bathroom, luxurious towels and high-quality toiletries awaited use. And on the bedside table, carefully, placed in a position of honor, sat Mabel's stuffed rabbit Hoppy, a bridge between my past life and this new beginning. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorman called to announce Lenny's arrival. I felt a flutter of nervousness. Would he be as supportive in the daylight as he had been last night? Or would Jessie have poisoned his mind against me, framing my departure as abandonment rather than necessary self-preservation? My worry melted away when I opened the door. Lenny stood there, eyes wide as he took in my new surroundings, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Whoa, Grandma," he breathed. "This place is incredible." He stepped inside, turning in a slow circle to absorb the spacious living area, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the tasteful furnishings. "You weren't kidding about having money." "No," I agreed, smiling at his uncomplicated reaction. "I wasn't." Mom didn't believe it at first. He said, wandering toward the windows to take in the view. She kept saying there had to be some mistake, that you must have gotten confused about some small inheritance. "And now?" He turned, his expression thoughtful. "I think she's in shock. She was on the phone with Jonah's sister Patricia half the night, going back and forth between saying you'd lost your mind and trying to figure out exactly how much money you have." The assessment didn't surprise me. Jessie had always measured worth in dollar amounts, even before Jonah's materialistic influence. "What about the others?" I asked. "Angie and Mabel?" They got your flowers this morning, Lenny replied, smiling. Again. Mabel was over the moon. She's been carrying your note around and showing it to everyone. Angie pretended not to care, but I saw her put hers on her desk where she could see it. The knowledge that my small gesture had been well received warmed me. And you? Did you get yours? His smile softened. Yeah, thanks, Grandma, for understanding. You're an extraordinary young man, I told him honestly, with a capacity for empathy that's rare at any age. A flush crept up his neck at the praise, and he changed the subject with teenage directness. So, where's the rest of your stuff? You said you needed help moving. In the basement, I confirmed. Just a few more boxes and some personal items. I've arranged for a car service with enough space. Well, let's go get them then, he said, already heading for the door. The sooner we get everything, the sooner you're officially moved in. His eagerness touched me. This wasn't just about moving boxes. It was about solidifying my separation from Jesse's house, completing my transition to independence. The ride to Jesse's house was filled with Lenny's excited questions about Riverside, about my hidden fortune, about my plans for the future. His unguarded enthusiasm was a balm after months of walking on eggshells around his mother and Jonah. You should start traveling, he suggested. See all those places you always talked about. Paris, Rome, Tokyo? Perhaps, I agreed. Would you like to come with me sometime? His eyes widened. For real? I've never been out of the country. For real, I confirmed. Summer break, perhaps, if your mother agrees. As we pulled into Jesse's driveway, I felt a familiar tension return. The house that had been my home for 20 years now felt alien, almost hostile. Lenny must have sensed my unease because he gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze. It'll be okay, he said. Mom's at work and Jonah took the girls shopping. Relief flooded through me at the prospect of retrieving my remaining possessions without confrontation. But as we approached the front door, it swung open to reveal a woman I didn't immediately recognize. Mrs. Crawford? She asked, her professional tone at odds with her presence in Jesse's home. Yes, I replied cautiously. I'm Amanda Wilson, from Elegant Transitions. Your daughter hired us to pack and inventory your belongings. She extended a business card that identified her as a senior relocation specialist. I didn't authorize, I began, but she smoothly interrupted. Everything has been carefully packed according to industry best practices. Each box is labeled with contents and destination room. We have a comprehensive inventory for you to review and sign. Lenny and I exchanged confused glances as we followed her inside. The living room contained several neatly labeled boxes and a clipboard with extensive documentation. As you can see, Amanda continued, we've separated items by category and value. Personal mementos, clothing, books, and so on. The inventory list includes condition notes and approximate values for insurance purposes. I don't understand, I said slowly. My daughter hired you to pack my things? Amanda nodded, professionally oblivious to the undercurrents. Yes, Mrs. Crawford. Ms. Jessie was quite specific about ensuring everything was handled with proper care. She mentioned you were moving to Riverside condominiums and wanted to make the transition as smooth as possible. I felt distinctly wrong-footed. This wasn't the resistance I had expected, not the angry confrontation or manipulative pleading I had prepared myself to face. Instead, Jessie had hired professionals to organize a smooth departure, a gesture that could be interpreted as either respectful facilitation or a calculated move to assert control over even my exit. I see, I said finally. Well, thank you for your efficiency. Just doing our job, Amanda replied with a practiced smile. If you'll review and sign the inventory, our team can load everything into your vehicle whenever you're ready. As I scanned the extensive list, I heard the front door open again. Turning, I saw Jessie enter, still in her nursing scrubs, her expression carefully neutral. Mom, she said, her voice controlled. I thought you might come by today. Yes, I replied, equally measured. Lenny was going to help me with my remaining belongings. Jessie nodded, gesturing to the boxes. I figured professional packing would be more efficient. Less strain on your arthritis. Her tone was impossible to read, solicitous or passive-aggressive, genuinely helpful or subtly controlling. After years of navigating her moods, I still couldn't be certain. That was thoughtful, I said finally. An awkward silence fell, broken only when Lenny cleared his throat. Should I help carry these out to the car? The movers will handle it, Jessie said quickly. Why don't you go check on your sisters? They should be back from shopping with Jonah soon. It was a transparent attempt to get Lenny out of the room, but he hesitated, looking to me for direction. I nodded slightly, giving him permission to leave. This conversation needed to happen between Jessie and me alone. Once he had gone, Jessie's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. So you're really doing this? Yes, I confirmed. I am. She moved to the window, staring out at the familiar neighborhood view. I spoke with Harrison Winters this morning. This surprised me. You did? I called Lakeside Trust to verify your claims, she admitted. He was very direct about his opinion of how I've treated you. I could imagine Harrison's unvarnished assessment. He had never been one to mince words, especially when it came to protecting those he cared about. He also said, Jessie continued, still looking out the window, that you've established irrevocable trusts for the children's education, that no matter what happens between you and me, they'll have college fully funded. Of course, I said. They're my grandchildren. That was always the plan. She turned to face me then, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Why didn't you tell me about the money, Mom? All these years, watching me work double shifts, stress about bills. Why keep it secret? It was the same question she had, asked last night, but now without the angry edge, with what seemed like genuine bewilderment. I've asked myself that question many times, I admitted. At first, it was because you needed to find your own strength after Sonny left. Later, it became more complicated. The longer I kept it secret, the harder it became to reveal. Jessie's gaze dropped to her hands, where she was twisting her wedding ring unconsciously. I keep thinking about the basement, she said softly. About how easy it was for me to put you down there. How I convinced myself it was the only option. Her admission, the first acknowledgement that she had made a choice rather than being forced by circumstances, caught me by surprise. If I had known you had options, she continued, that you weren't financially dependent on us, would I have treated you differently? It was the question at the heart of everything, the one I had tried to articulate last night. I think you would have, I said honestly. And that's precisely why the basement hurt so much. It wasn't about the physical discomfort. It was about what your willingness to put me there revealed about how you see me. She flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I admitted. But recognizing there's something to fix is a start. The moving team worked with quiet efficiency, loading my boxes into the waiting car. I stood in the driveway watching them, aware of Jessie hovering uncertainly nearby. There was so much left unsaid between us, so many years of small slights and growing resentments that couldn't be addressed in a single conversation. Would you like to see the condo? I asked suddenly, surprising myself with the invitation. You and the children, I mean. Perhaps this weekend? Jessie looked equally surprised. You'd want that? The children should know where I live, I said carefully. And despite everything, you're still my daughter. She nodded slowly. I'd like that. I think the kids would too. With the last box loaded, there was nothing left to delay my departure. I turned to Jessie, feeling the weight of this transition moment. I'll call to arrange the visit, I said. Perhaps Saturday afternoon. Saturday works, she agreed, then hesitated. Mom, Whatever she planned to say was interrupted by the arrival of another car, Jonah's luxury sedan pulling into the driveway. Angie and Mabel tumbled out from the back seat, laden with shopping bags, while Jonah emerged more slowly, his expression darkening when he spotted me. "Grandma!" Mabel cried, dropping her bags to race toward me. "I got your flowers! They're the prettiest ones ever!" I caught her in a hug, savoring her uncomplicated affection. "I'm so glad you liked them." Angie approached more cautiously, eyeing the moving van. "So you're really leaving?" "I'm really moving to my own place," I corrected gently. "But I'm not leaving you." Jonah strode up, positioning himself slightly in front of Jessie in a subtly protective stance. "Miriam?" He greeted me, his tone professionally cordial. "I understand congratulations are in order. Harrison Winters mentioned your situation when I called him this morning." My eyebrows rose at this information. "You called Harrison as well?" "Of course," he replied smoothly. "As a financial advisor myself, I wanted to ensure everything was in proper order. Your situation is quite unusual." I didn't miss the implication that he'd been checking for signs of confusion or fraud. "Harrison has managed my investments impeccably for over 20 years, I said coolly. "So it seems," Jonah conceded. "In fact, I'd like to discuss your portfolio further. Perhaps over dinner? Tonight, perhaps?" The abrupt shift in his demeanor, from treating me as a burdensome dependent to a potential client, was as transparent as it was galling. "I'm afraid I'm busy tonight," I replied. "Getting settled in my new home." "Tomorrow, then," he pressed. "I have some suggestions for estate planning that could benefit the whole family. Tax advantages, legacy considerations." "Jonah," Jessie interrupted, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "Not now." He turned to her, clearly perplexed by her interjection. "What?" "I'm simply offering professional guidance. With that level of assets, proper planning is essential." Their exchange confirmed what I had long suspected, that Jonah viewed relationships primarily through the lens of financial advantage. I had been dismissed when I appeared to have nothing. Now I was courted when I appeared to have much. The contrast could not have been starker. "Mr. Winters has my estate planning well in hand," I said firmly. "But thank you for your concern." Jonah's expression hardened slightly at the dismissal. "At least let me—" "The car is waiting," I interrupted, nodding toward the driver who stood patiently by the vehicle. "I should go." Mabel clutched my hand. "Can I come see your new place? Please?" "Soon," I promised, squeezing her fingers gently. "This weekend, if your parents agree." "Of course they agree," she declared with a child's certainty, shooting a look at her mother that brooked no argument. "Saturday afternoon," Jessie confirmed with a tight smile. "We'll be there." I hugged each grandchild one last time, nodded to Jonah, and gave Jessie a brief, awkward embrace. Then I slid into the waiting car, watching through the window as they stood grouped in the driveway. The family that had been my world for so long, now separated from me by more than just physical distance. As we pulled away, my phone chimed, with a text from Harrison. "Jonah called, fishing for information, told him nothing beyond confirming your assets are substantial and secure. Dinner tonight to discuss?" I smiled at Harrison's protectiveness and replied, "Yes, and thank you for everything." The drive back to Riverside passed in contemplative silence. The morning's events had not gone as expected. Instead of the angry confrontation I had anticipated, there had been a strange dance of awkward reconciliation with Jessie juxtaposed against Jonah's transparent calculation. Saturday's visit would be the real test. Would Jessie maintain this tentative respect when she saw my new home? Would Jonah continue his campaign to insert himself into my financial affairs? Would the careful boundaries I was establishing hold firm? As we approached Riverside, I felt both trepidation and resolve. The confrontation wasn't over. It had merely shifted to a new venue, one where I would no longer be at a disadvantage. Whatever happened on Saturday, I would be facing it not from a damp basement cot, but from the solid foundation of my own home, my own wealth, my reclaimed dignity. The true revelation was still to come. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear. Blue skies, golden sunshine, and just enough crispness in the air to make the river views from my terrace especially breathtaking. I had spent the intervening days settling into my new home, arranging my rescued possessions, and discovering the simple pleasures of independence. Harrison and I had dined together twice, finalizing my financial arrangements and discussing my plans for the future. He had been characteristically blunt in his assessment of Jonah's interest in my affairs. "He'll try to get his hands on your money," Harrison warned. "Men like him always do. Be careful." I had assured him I had no intention of allowing Jonah anywhere near my finances. Still, I couldn't help feeling nervous as the appointed hour for their visit approached. I had arranged for catering, an elegant tea service with sandwiches, pastries, and special cookies I knew Mabel loved, and had spent the morning ensuring everything was perfect. At precisely 3 o'clock, the concierge called to announce my visitor's arrival. I smoothed my silk blouse, took a deep breath, and opened the door to welcome them. The children entered first, Mabel rushing forward for a hug, Angie trying to appear nonchalant but unable to hide her wide-eyed wonder at the surroundings. Lenny, giving me a knowing smile. Jessie followed, carrying a bouquet of flowers, her expression a mixture of uncertainty and forced cheerfulness. Jonah came last, his appraising gaze taking in every detail of the luxury apartment with barely disguised calculation. "This is incredible," Angie breathed, moving to the windows. "You can see the whole city." "Grandma, where's Hoppy?" Mabel asked, looking around for her stuffed rabbit. "In your room," I replied, enjoying her confusion. "I have a room? Come, I'll show you." I led her to the guest bedroom with its 3 distinct areas. "This section is yours, the reading nook with space for all your stuffed animals, including Hoppy." Her squeal of delight as she discovered her beloved rabbit sitting in a tiny armchair brought a smile to everyone's face, even Jonah's briefly. "This desk area is for Angie," I continued, "with space for your science projects and books. And Lenny, this gaming setup is for you." Lenny examined the state-of-the-art computer and console with frank admiration. "This is better than my setup at home." "You've gone to a lot of trouble," Jessie observed quietly as the children explored their spaces. "They're important to me," I replied simply. Jonah cleared his throat. "This is quite a place, Miriam. Riverside is one of the most exclusive addresses in the city. The monthly fees alone must be, well, within my budget," I interrupted smoothly. "Would everyone like some refreshments? I've arranged for tea on the terrace." The terrace elicited another round of exclamations as we settled around the table. Mabel immediately reached for a cookie, while Angie peppered me with questions about the plants in the raised beds. Lenny discussed his college plans, mentioning a computer science program that particularly interested him. Throughout, I was acutely aware of the adults' reactions. Jessie seemed genuinely happy to see me in pleasant surroundings, though occasional flashes of something like regret crossed her face when she saw how comfortably the children interacted with me in this new setting. Jonah remained watchful, his gaze repeatedly returning to the expensive furnishings, the premium brand names, the small signs of luxury that surrounded us. Finally, as the children became absorbed in exploring the terrace garden, Jonah leaned forward with a confidential air. "Miriam, I've been giving your situation considerable thought. With assets at your level, proper management is crucial. While I'm sure Harrison has done an adequate job until now, my firm specializes in high-net-worth family planning. We could structure things to maximize intergenerational wealth transfer, minimize estate taxes, create a family legacy." "That's very kind," I interjected, "but unnecessary. My financial arrangements are complete." "No arrangement is ever truly complete," he persisted. "Markets change, tax laws evolve, family situations develop. For instance, Have you considered a family foundation? Pooling resources for greater impact, while providing tax advantages? I met his gaze steadily. By pooling resources, you mean combining my assets with yours? He nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Economies of scale, diversified management, aligned family interests. I'm afraid that won't be possible, I said pleasantly. My estate plan is finalized, with Harrison Winters as the sole executor. Jonah's smile tightened. As your son-in-law and a financial professional, I really should have some oversight. Mom, Jessie interrupted, surprising both of us. If Mom is happy with her current arrangements, we should respect that. Jonah turned to her, clearly startled by her intervention. Jessie, we're talking about significant assets that will eventually impact our family. Surely you see the importance of having input? What I see, Jessie replied with unexpected firmness, is that we're guests in my mother's home, and this conversation is inappropriate. The tension at the table was palpable. I decided it was time for the full revelation, not out of spite or desire for vindication, but because clarity was the only path forward for our family. Perhaps this is a good moment to share something with all of you, I said, my voice calm despite my racing heart. I've made some decisions about my estate that you should be aware of. I reached for a folder I had placed nearby and removed several documents. The majority of my assets will eventually establish the Marcus Crawford Educational Foundation, supporting scholarships for children from single-parent households. The remaining portions are allocated to specific beneficiaries. I handed Jessie a document. This details the children's trusts, education fully funded, plus seed money for their first homes or businesses when they reach appropriate ages. Jessie scanned the page, her eyes widening at the figures. Mom, this is incredibly generous. Jonah leaned over to see the document, his expression calculating. And the remainder? The foundation? Will be independently managed by a board that does not include any family members, I said firmly. To avoid exactly the kind of conflicts of interest you're currently displaying, Jonah. His face flushed. I'm simply trying to gain control of my assets, I finished for him. Which will not happen. Not now, not ever. An uncomfortable silence fell over the terrace. Jonah's face had darkened to a dangerous shade of red, while Jessie stared at the documents in her hands with a complicated expression. I think I'll check. On the children, I said, rising from my seat to give the couple a moment of privacy. As I stepped away, I heard Jonah's heated whisper, Did you know about this? A foundation? What about us? I found the children at the far end of the terrace. Lenny was helping Mabel water the herb garden, while Angie examined the small fountain, with the concentration of a budding scientist. These plants smell amazing, Mabel declared, running her fingers through the lavender. Can I grow some at home? Of course, I replied. We can start some cuttings for you to take home. Angie looked up from the fountain. This is a closed-loop system, right? With a solar pump? That's right, I confirmed, pleased by her observation. Environmentally friendly and very low maintenance. Lenny caught my eye, nodding subtly toward the table where his mother and stepfather were still engaged in tense conversation. Everything okay, Grandma? Just adult discussions, I assured him. Nothing for you to worry about. Before he could respond, Jessie approached, her expression composed though her eyes betrayed lingering tension. The children should see the rest of the building before we go. I hear there's a pool. I recognized the request for what it was, a way to remove the children while she and Jonah regrouped. Of course. Lenny, why don't you take your sisters down to the lobby? The concierge can show you the amenities. 5th floor has the pool and gym. The children eagerly headed inside, Mabel chattering about swimming lessons, and Angie wondering if the building had a proper library. When they were gone, I returned to the table where Jonah sat staring stonily at the skyline. I hope I haven't upset your plans, I said, my tone deliberately mild. Jonah's smile was tight and didn't reach his eyes. Not at all. Family foundations are wonderful philanthropic vehicles. I simply thought, given my professional experience, I might offer some guidance. The foundation will have highly qualified advisors, I replied. But I appreciate your concern. Jessie placed her hand on Jonah's arm, a subtle restraining gesture. Mom, the trusts for the children are extraordinarily generous. We're grateful, truly. Jonah nodded stiffly, clearly still processing the implications of my financial decisions that effectively removed my wealth from his sphere of influence. I wanted to ensure their futures are secure, I said. Education has always been important to me, and to your father. Dad would be proud, Jessie said softly. Of the foundation especially. He always believed in helping others. For a moment, I glimpsed the daughter I had raised, thoughtful, empathetic, capable of seeing beyond immediate self-interest. It gave me hope that beneath the materialistic values Jonah had encouraged, the real Jessie still existed. Jonah cleared his throat. Well, we should probably gather the children. It's getting late, and we don't want to overstay our welcome. You're not overstaying, I assured him, though privately I was relieved at the prospect of their departure. The emotional weight of the visit had left me drained. As if sensing my fatigue, Jessie stood. We should go. But Mom, I'd like to come back. Just the two of us. Maybe for lunch next week? There are things I'd like to talk about, without an audience. The request surprised me. I had expected Jonah's disappointment, but not this apparent olive branch from Jessie. I'd like that, I said honestly. Jonah's phone chimed, and he checked it with a frown. Work emergency, he muttered. I'll get the kids and meet you downstairs. After he'd gone, Jessie lingered, twisting her wedding ring in that familiar nervous gesture. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about seeing you as a person, not just my mother or the children's grandmother. And, I prompted gently. And I think you were right, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I stopped seeing you. Somewhere along the way, I just reduced you to a function in our lives. The simple acknowledgement, offered without excuses or qualifications, touched me deeply. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a great deal. The weeks following that pivotal Saturday transformed our family dynamics in ways I could never have predicted. The most immediate change was in my relationship with my grandchildren. Freed from the basement and Jessie's controlling oversight, I could now invite them to visit whenever they wished. Mabel became a weekend regular, arriving Saturday mornings with a backpack full of projects and toys, eager to tend our garden on the terrace. Angie, initially more reserved, began stopping by after her science club meetings, bringing experiments to show me or books she thought I might enjoy. Lenny visited less frequently due to his busy schedule, but called often, treating me as a confidant rather than an obligation. My lunch with Jessie the following week had been tense but productive. Without Jonah's presence, she spoke more openly about the changes in her perspective. I've been looking at old photographs, she admitted, remembering how much you sacrificed for us after Dad died, after Sonny left. Somehow I forgot. We often forget what becomes familiar, I replied. Your father used to say that gratitude requires mindfulness. She nodded, eyes downcast. Jonah is furious about the foundation, about being excluded from your financial planning. He had expectations. I imagine he did, I said carefully. He suggested contesting your estate plan on grounds of competency. She continued, not meeting my gaze. Since you kept the money secret for so long, he thinks we could make a case that you've been mentally unstable. The revelation didn't surprise me as much as it might have. And what did you tell him? That he was being ridiculous, unethical, and cruel, she said, finally looking up. That I wouldn't participate in any attempt to challenge your decisions or question your competence. Her defense of me, unexpected and unequivocal, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply. The most dramatic consequence came 3 weeks after my move. Lenny called early one morning, his voice tight with distress. "Grandma, can I come over? Something's happened." An hour later, he sat on my sofa, shoulders hunched, hands clasped between his knees. "Mom and Jonah had a huge fight last night. About you, about the money, about everything. He kept saying you'd manipulated everyone, that your money should be pooled for family benefit, meaning his management." I listened silently, unsurprised but saddened. "Mom finally snapped," Lenny continued. "Said she was sick of him treating her family like financial resources to be exploited." They screamed at each other for hours. This morning she told him to leave. "Oh, Lenny," I sighed. "I'm so sorry you had to witness that." He shook his head. "Don't be sorry. This has been coming for a long time. Jonah's always been more interested in what we represent than who we are. Your situation just brought it into the open." His perception was remarkable for someone so young, reminding me again of Marcus's insightfulness. 2 days later, Jessie herself appeared at my door, eyes red-rimmed, but chin high. "Jonah's moved out," she announced without preamble. "I've consulted a divorce attorney." I ushered her inside, settling her on the sofa with tea as she explained the rapid dissolution of her marriage. "Your situation clarified things for me," she said, clutching her teacup like a lifeline. "Watching how he reacted to your wealth, how quickly he shifted from dismissing you to trying to control your assets, it was like seeing our entire relationship through a different lens." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it sincerely. No matter Jonah's flaws, divorce was painful, disruptive, especially for the children. She shook her head. "Don't be. I'm not. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Like I'm making choices based on what's right rather than what's expected." We sat in companionable silence for a moment before she continued, her voice quieter. "You know what I keep thinking about? That basement. How easily I convinced myself it was acceptable to put you there. How I justified it as necessity when it was really about control, about relegating you to the margins of our lives." The raw honesty in her voice moved me deeply. "I keep wondering," she continued, "if I would have treated you the same way had I known about the money. And the truth is, I probably wouldn't have. And that makes me ashamed." "We all have moments we wish we could revisit with greater wisdom," I offered gently. Jessie met my gaze directly. "I'm trying to be worthy of your forgiveness, Mom. I don't expect it yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I'm trying." "I know," I said, reaching for her hand. "That's more than enough for now." 6 months after moving into Riverside, my life had transformed so completely that the basement existence felt like a distant nightmare, something that had happened to someone else entirely. Spring arrived with a burst of color on my terrace garden, where Mabel and I had planted bulbs. During the winter months, tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths created a riot of colors against the backdrop of the river. I spent peaceful mornings there with my coffee, watching boats pass and birds soar, savoring the simple pleasure of autonomy. The Marcus Crawford Educational Foundation was officially established, with a respected board that included several of my former teaching colleagues. We had already awarded our first scholarships to 5 promising students from single-parent households, each one reminding me in different ways of Lenny, Angie, and Mabel when they were younger. My relationship with Jessie continued to heal, slowly but steadily. The divorce from Jonah had been finalized with surprising speed, his initial threats to contest it fading when his lawyer explained the likely costs and low probability of success. He had relocated to another city for a career opportunity, but the children seemed more relieved than bereft at his absence. Jessie had returned to school to complete her master's degree in nursing, something she had postponed when Jonah entered her life. I attended her first presentation, a research project on elder care protocols, with immense pride. Watching her speak with passion and authority about treating older patients with dignity felt like witnessing the return of the daughter I had raised. "Your work is important," I told her afterward. "You'll change how people think about aging." "I hope so," she replied. "It took nearly losing you to understand how badly our systems fail older adults." The children thrived in the new family configuration. Lenny had been accepted to 3 top universities, all with computer science programs. Angie had won her school's science fair with a project on urban water conservation inspired by my terrace fountain. Mabel had developed an unexpected interest in cooking, spending weekend afternoons in my kitchen learning to prepare family recipes I had almost forgotten. As for me, I discovered that financial security combined with personal autonomy created a foundation for joy I hadn't experienced in decades. I joined a book club at Riverside, began taking Spanish lessons in preparation for a trip to Barcelona, and even started dating, tentatively, awkwardly, but with genuine pleasure, a retired professor I met at a foundation event. "You're blossoming," Harrison observed during one of our regular lunches. "It suits you." "Freedom suits me," I corrected him, smiling. "Being seen suits me." The most profound change, however, wasn't in my circumstances, but in my self-perception. No longer defined solely as mother, grandmother, caretaker, roles that had both sustained and confined me, I was rediscovering Miriam Crawford as a woman with her own desires, opinions, and potential. On warm evenings, I often sat on my terrace, watching the sunset paint the river in shades of gold and crimson. Sometimes I was alone with my thoughts, other times surrounded by family or new friends. Either way, I felt a contentment that had nothing to do with the luxury of my surroundings, and everything to do with the hard-won knowledge that I mattered, not for what I provided others, but simply for who I was. The basement had been my lowest point, but also the catalyst for my rebirth. From that dark, damp space had emerged a woman who would never again permit herself to be diminished, relegated, or unseen. I had finally learned the lesson I most needed to teach: that dignity is not granted by others, but claimed by oneself; that boundaries are not selfish but necessary; that love without respect is merely use. And perhaps most importantly, that it is never too late to start again. People often ask if I regret keeping my fortune secret for so many years. If I wish. I had revealed the truth sooner, spared myself the indignity of the basement, preserved my relationship with Jessie before it deteriorated so badly. It's a fair question, one I've asked myself many times during quiet moments of reflection. The truth is, I don't regret the secret itself. What I regret is allowing my sense of self-worth to become so entangled with sacrifice that I forgot my own value. I regret believing that love meant accepting mistreatment, that family bonds required the erasure of personal boundaries. For too long, I convinced myself that being needed was the same as being loved, that providing for others, financially, emotionally, practically, was the only way to secure my place in their lives. It wasn't just about the money. It was about a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes relationships healthy and sustainable. What I've learned in this journey is that true family connections can't be built on dependency or obligation. They must be rooted in mutual respect, in seeing each other as complete human beings with intrinsic value beyond the roles we play or the resources we provide. The basement wasn't just a physical space. It was the culmination of a pattern established over decades, a pattern in which I gradually surrendered pieces of myself until there was almost nothing left. My revelation about the money didn't create the problem. It simply exposed what was already there. I sometimes wonder what Marcus would think of all this. He was always the wiser one about boundaries, about self-respect. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Miriam," he would tell me when I pushed myself too hard for others. If he were here, I think he would be proud, Not of the foundation that bears his name, but of the woman who finally learned to value herself enough to stand her ground. The greatest surprise in this late-life transformation has been discovering how much more I have to give when I give from wholeness rather than depletion. My relationships with my grandchildren are deeper and more authentic. My reconnection with Jessie, while still healing, has more honesty than we've shared in years. Even my community engagement through the foundation brings a satisfaction that charity born of obligation never could. I've come to believe that the most valuable inheritance we leave our children isn't financial wealth, though that certainly can help ease life's practical burdens. It's the example we set in how we live, how we love, how we honor ourselves while caring for others. For too many years, I modeled self-erasure rather than self-respect. Perhaps the most meaningful gift I can offer my family now is demonstrating that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, to establish healthy boundaries, to insist on being seen. The journey from basement to penthouse wasn't really about moving upward physically. It was about rising into my full selfhood, about refusing to be diminished any longer. The fortune Marcus left me provided the practical means for this transformation, but the true change happened within, in recognizing that my worth was never contingent on what I gave or what I endured. To anyone finding themselves in a basement of their own making, whether literal or metaphorical, I would say this: the key to your freedom lies not in what others give you, but in what you refuse to surrender. Your dignity, your boundaries, your right to be treated with basic human respect. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice. Sometimes it's simply standing firm in your truth and saying, "No more. I deserve better than this." Because you do. We all do. And it's never, not ever, too late to claim it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.